My husband divorced me by text. I'm leaving you and moving to Las Vegas with my 22-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account, sold your car, and canceled your credit cards, huh? But when he realized what I had done, it was already too late. I've taken everything from you, he wrote cute. Very cute. I let the words sit there for a moment, my fingers tracing the rim of my glass. He thought he had one, but what he didn't know, what he could never have guessed, is that by the time he sent that text, there was nothing left for him to take, because I already had it all. I set my phone down slowly, almost reverently, as if his words deserved a moment of silence before their inevitable demise. The room around me was quiet, the soft hum of the city beyond my window, the only sound he imagined me. Broken, sobbing, lost in despair. How disappointing for him. I reached for the sleek leather folder on my desk, the one I had prepared months ago. When his behavior had started shifting at first, I had chalked it up to the usual excuses, stress routine, the wear and tear of yours together, but then came the secrecy. The hurried calls, the subtle distancing I had watched in silence, not out of fear or uncertainty, but calculation. I had learned long ago that silence was a weapon, and I had wielded it well. His text, so smug, so final, was nothing more than a confirmation of what I already knew. He had planned this, mapped it out like a grand escape, believing he had orchestrated my downfall with the precision of a mastermind. But a true mastermind never reveals their game until the final move, and I wasn't playing checkers. I was playing chess, the pieces he never saw moving. I had been 3 steps ahead, long before he ever thought of betraying me. The first thing I did, I moved the money, not all at once. No, I wasn't. Reckless, small calculated transfers ones. He wouldn't notice amidst his own careless spending. A little here, a little there, until our so-called joint account was nothing more than a shallow puddle of leftovers by the time. He walked into that bank, ready to drain our savings. He had unknowingly left with crumbs, and the best part, he wouldn't realize it right away. He would think he had won. He would revel in his supposed victory, believing he had left me stranded. But reality would hit him soon enough, the moment of realization. I could almost picture it, him standing in the bank, confidently handing over his account details, expecting a hefty sum to fund his new life. And then confusion, a frown, a quiet panic. As the numbers didn't add up, he would check again, perhaps blaming a system glitch. Maybe even demanding to speak to his manager. But the answer would be the same. Insufficient funds, not exactly the grand departure he had envisioned. And what of my car? The one he so boldly claimed to have sold, that had been taken care of 2 weeks ago. I had transferred the title to my best friend's name, just in case whoever bought it had just engaged in a mysterious dealing with a man who had no right to sell it in the first place. A fraudulent sale, a legal mess. Another problem for him to unravel. While I sat back and watched the call, he would never expect. I didn't check my phone, didn't bother looking for a response. I knew it would come eventually, the moment he realized that his great escape had unraveled before it had even begun. That's when the calls would start first. Maybe once or twice, just to see if I would answer. Then again, more urgently, more insistently. And finally, when he could no longer deny the truth. When desperation seeped in like an unwelcome guest. That's when he would break. Would he apologize? Doubtful. He wasn't the kind he would rationalize. Attempt to manipulate. Try to convince me that I was the one being unreasonable. We can work something out. You don't want to do this. Think about all we had, but the audacity of a man who thought his actions were the only ones that mattered. But he wouldn't find me where he left me. No, I had already moved forward while he remained trapped in the wreckage of his own making. The moment I had been waiting for, the phone finally buzzed. Not a text at the time, but a call. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I could almost feel his frustration through the screen, the slow dawning realization that he was no longer in control. Then with a slow, deliberate exhale, I answered. I didn't speak first. Let him sit in the silence he had once left me in. And then in a voice as calm as the storm he never saw coming, I simply said, You took everything from me, oh darling, I left you with nothing. Silence. The hesitation on the other end, then the stammering. What did you do? I smiled, sipping from my glass as I watched the city lights flicker in the distance. Oh, sweetheart, you should have been paying more attention. And then before he could sputter another useless excuse, I ended the call. It was already too late for him. And just like that, the game was over. I won the call, ended, and with it the last remnants of his illusion. I leaned back, feeling the weight of months of preparation settle into something lighter. Satisfaction. He had walked into his own trap, completely unaware, completely confident. The irony was almost poetic. I stared at my reflection in the window, the city glowing beneath me, a sea of moving lights. The woman who looked back wasn't broken, wasn't lost. He was steady, taken a version of herself that had been waiting to emerge. I had known. Of course, I had known. Not just about his betrayal, but about who he was at his core. A man who mistook deception for brilliance, who believed he could take and take without consequence. And that's what made this all the more satisfying. He had orchestrated his own downfall, one careless mistake at a time. The first time he came home late, I noticed. The first time he moved money out of our account, I tracked it. The first time he lied, I listened, but I never reacted, never confronted. Said I prepared, because revenge isn't about anger, it's about patience. My first move was the bank, quiet, subtle withdrawals. Over time, each small enough to go unnoticed, but large enough to make an impact. The money he thought he had stolen was nothing more than a shadow of what had once been there by the time he emptied the account. He was draining what I had left behind, believing he had outsmarted me. The second move was the car, a simple transfer of ownership signed, notarized, locked away in a safe place. He had no idea he was selling something that legally belonged to someone else, a disastrous mistake that would catch up with him soon enough. And then the credit cards. He thought he had canceled mine. I let him believe it, but while he was cutting me off, I was securing my own, under my name, separate from his reach. The moment he realized he had stranded himself. Instead, I hoped he enjoyed the irony. Each step had been calculated, each move a quiet checkmate, and now as he spiraled, desperately trying to grasp onto the control he had so easily thrown away, I simply waited. He would call again, he would beg. He would try to turn this around, but I was already gone. The city outside buzzed with life, but I had never felt calmer. The waiting was over, the game was won, and all that was left was to watch him crumble. I picked up my glass, took a slow sip, and smiled. It was already too late. I swirled the last remnants of my drink, the ice clinking softly against the glass. Somewhere across the country, my husband. No, my ex-husband was experiencing the kind of cold realization that tightened the chest and burned through the veins, the moment where confidence turns to disbelief, where the mind races to grasp at something, anything, to explain the impossible. I imagined him standing at a sleek Las Vegas bank counter, his impatience growing as the teller's brows furrowed at the screen, his voice clipped and agitated, demanding an explanation, and then confusion. That can't be right. Check again. The numbers wouldn't change, they never would. I leaned back, picturing it so vividly, it almost felt real, the banker polite but firm, shaking their head, the repeated denials, the dawning realization, and then the first cracks of panic. He had counted on that money. It was supposed to fund his grand escape, champagne suites, luxury shopping, expensive dinners with the new woman he had so proudly chosen over me. A new life built on what he had stolen, except he hadn't stolen anything. I had simply let him take what was never worth keeping. The phone buzzed beside me. Not the first time, it had been going off for the past hour. Each call a little more frantic than the last. I let it ring, let him stew. He needed time to process, to truly understand what had happened. Another buzz of voicemail this time? Curious. I tapped the screen, lifting the phone to my ear. What did you do? The money's gone. Where is it? This isn't funny. Call me back now. A small, satisfied smile tugged at my lips. Oh, darling, it was never yours to begin with. You would try again, I knew that much. He wasn't the type to admit defeat easily, not when he had spent years believing himself untouchable, always one step ahead. But there was a difference between confidence and arrogance had been his downfall. I stood stretching my muscles pleasantly sore. From the weight finally lifting off my shoulders, another call this time? I answered silence, not the triumphant, smug kind he had expected, not the shattered, broken version he had hoped for. Just silence, and then his voice low, forced calm, covering unmistakable desperation. "You need to fix this," I almost laughed. I needed to fix this. The audacity, I let the paw drag on long enough for his nerves to fray. Finally, I spoke. "Fix what exactly?" "The bank, the money, I don't know what you did, but I want it back." I inhaled deeply, pretending to think, "Oh, you mean the money you took from our joint account." I let the words settle before continuing, voice smooth as silk. "Well, unfortunately, that account wasn't as full as you thought." You see, I had been preparing for this moment for quite some time, silence not the stunned kind. No, this was worse. This was realization you knew. Of course I knew. A sharp exhale on the other end. He was spiraling. I could almost hear the gears in his head turning desperately, trying to find a way out. "Fine," he said, voice tight. "Fine, we'll figure something out. I just need you to transfer some money back." That was the moment I truly smiled. "Oh, sweetheart, you're assuming I have any reason to help you." A sharp intake of breath. "You don't get it," he snapped, frustration seeping through. "I need that money, and I needed my marriage to mean something. But here we are." Another pause. A shift in his tone. "Look, I think we're done here." I hung up the messages, started immediately. The guilt trip, the faux concern, the thinly veiled threats. It was also predictable. I ignored them all. Somewhere in a Vegas hotel room, a man who had spent his entire life believing he could manipulate and take without consequence was finally learning what it felt like to have nothing, and I had never felt more free. I stared at my phone, watching his messages stack up like a house of cards teetering on collapse. First the demands, then the bargaining, finally the desperation. "You're making a mistake. We can talk about this. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to fix this now. This is going to come back on you. I'll make sure of it." That last one made me laugh. The irony of a man who had gleefully dismantled my life, now grasping at the last fraying threads of his own. He still didn't understand that this wasn't about revenge. It was about closure, about making sure he felt the weight of every selfish decision, every callous move, every moment he had treated me like I was disposable. And the worst part? I wasn't even finished yet. Thought the empty bank account was the worst of it. That was just the beginning. I opened my laptop, clicking through the neatly organized folders I had been building for months. Documents, statements, emails, evidence, every shady business deal, every careless financial decision, every secret he had tried to keep. Be married, he had built his life on illusions, a carefully crafted persona of success and control. I had simply gathered the truth and placed it neatly on a platter. The first email went out. A polite professional message to one of his former business partners, someone I knew had already been growing suspicious of his handling of their joint projects. I attached the files, letting the facts speak for themselves. A courtesy, really. The second email was to our former landlord. The lease had always been under my name. He just never noticed. With a few clicks, I ensured that he would return from his little Las Vegas adventure to find his access revoked. No key, no security clearance, no home waiting for him. The third. That one was my favorite. The car buyer, the man who had unknowingly paid for a vehicle. My ex had no legal right to sell a short conversation, a forwarded document proving ownership, and a simple question: "Would you like to press charges?" I didn't stay to hear. His answer already knew what it would be with each move. I could feel the walls closing in around him, not by force, not by vengeance, just consequence, pure, unfiltered consequence. The phone buzzed again this time. A call. I let it ring twice, 3 times, then finally I answered. I didn't speak first. I let him sit in the silence. Let the weight of everything crash down on him. "What did you do?" His voice was no longer the smug, arrogant tone from his first message. He was tight, panicked. He had finally caught up to the reality I had set in motion. I simply made sure everything was exactly as it should be, I said smoothly. You ruined me. No, I corrected. I just let the truth catch up with you. Another silence. I imagined him gripping his phone, pacing in some overpriced hotel suite, his world crumbling faster than he could piece it back together. I can fix this. He tried, the desperation bleeding through. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. You don't understand, do you? I said, my voice eerily calm. There's nothing left to fix. He was still trying to play the game, still trying to bluff his way out. But the board was empty, and the pieces had long since been moved. You took everything from me, he said, his voice breaking. I smiled just slightly. No, I said, voice steady. You gave it away. And with that, I ended the call. Let him sit in the ruins. Let him finally understand what it meant to lose, because, for the first time in his life, he had no one left to blame but himself. I placed my phone down, exhaling slowly as the weight of finality settled over me. There was nothing left to say. Nothing left to take. He had played his hand, believing he was untouchable, and now he was standing in the ruins of his own making. I could almost hear his breaths on the other end, even though I had ended the call. Shallow, frantic, his mind racing, scrambling for a way out, but there wasn't one he had spent years manipulating, taking, deceiving, and now for the first time, he was the one left stranded. A flicker of movement outside caught my eye. The city was still alive, oblivious to the storm unraveling in one man's life. A man who had thought he could walk away without consequences, and then the phone buzzed again. I didn't need to look. I already knew he wasn't done yet. I let it ring once, twice, then I answered silence. Not the defiant, arrogant. Silence from before. This was different. This was hesitation. I waited. Let him sit in the discomfort. Let him feel the weight of it. I need to talk to you, he finally said. His voice was no longer demanding, no longer sharp with entitlement. It was lower, softer, strained. I leaned back, toying with the rim of my glass. We already talked. Oh, you don't understand, he stammered. I made a mistake. I laughed, a quiet, disbelieving sound. Oh, sweetheart, that much is obvious. He exhaled sharply. I can fix this. We can fix this. I felt a strange kind of amusement, a detached curiosity. He still believed words could bend reality, that he could talk his way out, smooth things over. You're not listening, I said, tilting my head. There is nothing left to fix. I've simply made sure you have exactly what you gave me, nothing. A long pause. I could almost hear the way his throat tightened, the way realization pressed into him. I know I heard you. He tried shifting tactics. I was selfish. I see that now, but we built a life together that has to mean something. It was almost impressive the way he adapted, how quickly he abandoned his pride. The moment he felt it slipping. But I had seen the pattern before, the charm, the guilt, the subtle push toward forgiveness. You're right, I said, my voice smooth. We did build something. I let the words settle before continuing. And then you set it on fire and walked away, a shaky breath on the other end. His walls were crumbling. I don't know where to go, he admitted, voice raw. I don't have. He stopped himself as if saying it aloud would solidify the truth. I stayed silent, waiting. I have nothing, he whispered. I let the words hang between us. Let him taste them, I know, I said simply. He inhaled, sharply, as if the finality of it had just hit him. So what, you just get to move on while you what? I cut in, my voice unwavering. Face the consequences, feel the weight of your own choices. Another silence, but this time there was no fight left in it, no anger, no arrogance, just surrender. I didn't think it would end like this, he admitted. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, not out of sadness, not out of regret, but because of how utterly predictable this moment was. Neither did I said finally. And then without another word, I ended the call. This time, I knew he wouldn't call back. As now he finally understood it was over. The silence after I ended the call was different this time. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the absence of him, no more. Pleading, no more manipulation, no more empty words. That once carried weight, he had finally accepted what I had known. All along, there was no escape. I set my phone down. Exhaling slowly, the city outside stretched endlessly, lights blinking like distant stars somewhere in a cold hotel room. He was sitting with his head in his hands, staring at a future he had never planned for. I imagined the sequence unfolding. First, he would try to convince himself there was still a way out. A loophole, a last-minute save he'd PCE the room. Checking his phone, waiting for a message that would never come. Then the reality would settle in like a slow-moving storm. The hotel bill would arrive, and his credit card would decline. He would check his accounts, hoping. Praying that something had changed, that maybe, just maybe I had relented. But the numbers wouldn't lie. The money was gone, the car was gone, the home no longer. His to return to with nowhere else to turn. He would reach out to the only people left. His so-called friends, the ones who had laughed with him, toasted to his freedom, cheered him on when he flaunted his new life. But those people were never really his. They were there for the lifestyle, for the indulgence, for the illusion the moment the money vanished. So did their loyalty one by one. They would stop responding, calls would go straight to voicemail messages, would be left unread. And then the final blow, the woman he had abandoned me for, the one he had thrown everything away to impress, would realize the truth. He wasn't the charming, successful man she thought he was. He wasn't the provider, the protector, the dream she had convinced herself he could be. He was broke, and a man with nothing was a man who held no value in her world. I could picture it so clearly, the way her tone would shift, the way her patience would run thin. At first she might pretend to care, say the right things, offer small reassurances, but then she would leave, not in a dramatic scene, not in a tearful goodbye. Just dig on a simple message, perhaps I need some space, or worse, nothing at all, and then he would be alone for the first time in his life. There would be no safety net, no fallback plan, just the weight of everything he had done. I stood stretching my arms, feeling lighter than I had in years. There was nothing left to hold me down. I had one, not because I had taken anything from him, but because I had taken myself back, and that was something he would never get back. Not now, not ever. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the city move below me. The streets pulsed with life. Cars weaving through traffic, people hurrying to destinations unknown. I used to feel trapped in moments like this, suffocated by the weight of my past, by the choices I thought I had to live with. But tonight the air was different. I was free for the first time in years. I wasn't waiting for the next betrayal, the next excuse, the next moment, where I had to swallow my disappointment and pretend it didn't hurt. The past was behind me, and the road ahead was mine alone to shape. I turned, letting my fingers skim across the sleek marble countertop, the cool surface grounding me in this new reality. My new apartment was nothing extravagant, just enough space to feel comfortable to breathe it. Wasn't filled with meaningless luxuries or empty reminders of someone else's idea of success. It was mine, every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf, every decision I had. Chosen it, no compromises, no settling. The soft chime of my phone pulled me from my thoughts. A message, but not from him, not anymore. It was a friend checking in, reminding me about the dinner. We had planned a small thing, but it made me smile. For so long I had let myself shrink, let my world revolve around one person who had never truly seen me. Now I was reclaiming everything. Friendships, dreams, even the simple joy of making plans that were mine alone. I grabbed my coat, slipping into it effortlessly as I stepped out into the crisp evening air. I felt lighter. There was no more weight on my shoulders. No more silent battles I had to fight, and the past was exactly where it belonged, behind me. And for the first time I was walking towards something instead of running away. The evening air felt crisp against my skin as I walked down the bustling street, weaving through groups of people, lost in their own conversations. The city hummed with energy, its rhythm steady, unconcerned with the ghosts of my past. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. There was no weight pressing against my chest, no silent battle raging inside my mind. Everything was exactly as it should be, or so I thought. A familiar number flashed on my screen, not him. I had made sure he no longer had the power to reach me. No, this was different. I hesitated before answering. I wasn't sure you'd pick up the voice on the other end, said smoothly. It had been a while since I'd heard it, but the familiarity was undeniable. I figured you'd be calling sooner or later, I replied, my voice steady. You really outdid yourself this time. There was a note of amusement, but beneath it something else, curiosity. Maybe even admiration. Had to, I said simply. There was a brief pause, the kind that held meaning in its silence. He's scrambling, they continued, their voice laced with something close to satisfaction, called in every favor he thought he had left. But it turns out no one's interested in helping him. Not anymore. I let that sink in. He thought he was untouchable, I said. Finally, turns out he was just playing a game. He never understood. A small chuckle on the other end. And you were the one holding all the cards. I didn't respond. I didn't have to because we both knew the truth. This had never been a battle of strength. It had been a game of patience, of strategy. And while he had spent years believing he was the one in control, I had been quietly dismantling his foundation piece by piece. What now, they asked. I glanced up at the skyline. The city stretching out endlessly before me. I repeated, a slow smile forming. Now, I moved forward, another pause in him. I exhaled my breath. Steady, he lives with the consequences of his choices, I said finally. Just like the rest of us. The call ended, I slipped my phone into my pocket and kept walking, the past finally behind me, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back.